טוב, אז אנחנו נשמע ראיון עם סלים. סלים הוא מומחה באמפתיה בצוותים ובליווי מנהלים. אחד האנשים המרתקים שיצא לנו להכיר באג'ימה, ואנחנו איתו כבר הולכים כברת דרך ולומדים ממנו הרבה ומשתפים פעולה. אז בואו נשמע את סלים.
Hi, Slim.
Hello, Limor.
How are you?
I am hanging in there, literally.
You seem very seated, not hanging.
No, that's not. That's true. I'm sitting down, but psychologically hanging in there.
It's so great to have you here with us in Agile Infinity.
Thank you for reaching out. It really was a pleasant surprise to hear from you.
Yeah, I really couldn't imagine to have an Agile news release about how we adapt to the Corona situation without having you with us and hearing your special point of view. So tell our viewers a bit about yourself and what would you like to share with us?
Yeah, so a little bit about myself. So my name is Slim, and I'm an executive coach to CEOs, founders of tech companies.
Mm-hmm.
And the two things that I primarily focus on is their leadership performance, and their as well as which includes their psychological health, and also their communications and relationships to people in and outside of their businesses. And the thing that I wanted to talk about today was resilience.
Okay.
And I think this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, because I think it kind of organizes a lot of the things that I believe are crucial to businesses, but are for various reasons missing. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I think this is what I want to talk about. So I want to use an analogy, because I think it's usually easier to understand when there's an analogy. So you have muscles in your body, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So think about the way your muscles develop. Like the way that your muscles develop is very simple. First, your muscle experiences tension, like you lift weights or you do exercise, whatever, right? And then you release that tension, right? So you stop lifting weights, you let it go, or you stop exercising. And then you eat like food, your nutrients. And you also have hormones.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also sleep, right? Which is also a time when hormones kick in and things of that sort, right?
Some took only the last few things you said, but okay.
Right. So yeah, so number one, experience tension. Number two, release tension. Number three, feed your body with nutrients, hormone, and rest.
Mm-hmm.
And if you repeat the cycle, your muscle develops. It's very, very simple, well known, it's science, etc. Right? So if you go one layer deeper, I think what that also implies is that you must experience tension, which is uncomfortable, sometimes even painful. And in fact, it actually causes micro damages to your muscle, right? So you don't want to hold on to your tension for too long because you'll get injured. You don't want to put too much tension because you'll also get injured. You must release your tension, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you repeat the cycle, and then you feed it nutrients, hormones, and rest, your muscle will develop. Right?
Okay.
Now, for the audience in your conference, I'm imagining most people are not physical laboring people, right? But they're knowledge workers, right? They're in the tech industry. They're either programming, they're managers, or they're thinking about strategies. They're using their psychology, their mind, less than their physical muscle, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But I think it's useful to think about your psychology and the relationships you have with people in your organizations like a muscle. Right?
Okay.
So in your knowledge work, you're going to experience tension, either alone, trying to figure out what to do about something. So you're creating tension in your psychology, right? You're also experience tension with other people in your organization, which is the relationship between you and your, coworker, your boss, your client, or whoever.
Mm-hmm.
So in exactly the same way, if you think about muscles, for your psychological and relational muscles to develop, you must experience tension.
So these days, I believe this is a good exercise because we feel a lot of tension.
A lot of tension. A lot of tension.
No need to simulate it.
Right. So you can really feel it, right?
Yeah.
And you can feel the micro damages they're doing to your psychology and your relationship. Like it's very, very visible, right?
Okay.
So, but keep in mind, but ideally you don't want to hold on to the tension for too long, or your psychology or your relationship will get injured, right?
So,
and what's that?
What is your experience when, as organizations and teams and individuals are having this kind of tension? You know, there are many ways how to get it free, and not all of them are healthy.
Right. But I think the first step is to notice that these tensions can lead to injury, right?
Yeah.
Because this is the part that I think is either taboo or not talked about. Because you say like, oh, I'm not hurt. Or like, oh, you're like your feelings are hurt. Like there's this sort of weird thing about kind of machismo around like, oh, I'm not hurt. I'm okay. But if you think about it like a muscle, it will lead to injury.
Yeah.
I think this is very important first step to admit that when we experience tension, it's causing micro damages to our psychology and our relationship. And if we hold on for too long, or if we put too much tension, it will lead to injury.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong about this, but for some reason we shut it out. Like, oh, it's okay, it's nothing. We ignore it, we brush it off. And this is, I think, the first mistake that we always make is we ignore it because it's nothing. Right?
But do you think it's all the time that we ignore it, or it's because we are currently in tension, so it's like a survival, so we are struggling and doing everything in very much focus, so we don't bring it up, and only afterwards we understood what happened to us, and then the muscle is already broken.
Right, exactly, right? So when I say ignore, I don't mean like simply pretend that it's not there. Another way of ignoring is distracting.
Yeah.
Right? You kind of hide it, suppress it, and you focus on something else. It's like you just got shot, and you're like, oh, this is okay. I'm just gonna like keep doing something. Like you could do that, but in the meanwhile, you're like your arm's rotting.
Yeah.
That's basically what happens in so many of our organizations. So I think you're exactly right, but I think it's also important to notice that we acknowledge and admit that that is what's going on, right? Because that's really what's happening, right? So I think that the next step is to, once we admit that there is tension and that it's causing damages and it's causing injuries, the question that usually comes up is like, all right, fine. So we don't want to hold on to tension for too long. So how do we release our tension? So the easy answer is that the only way that I've seen tensions release, either in psychology or in relationships, is empathy, right? So, and in particular, it's what I call realizing empathy, right? So we realize empathy when we empathize with someone or something we previously could not by experiencing a moment of realization, right? Where we go, aha, or like, ah, or like, ah, about something we either did not or had incorrectly assumed to understand or appreciate fully, right? And this applies both to the two situations. Like first one is like, let's say you're alone trying to figure out what to do about something. Like you're creating tension in your psychology. Once you realize empathy, you go, oh, that's what I should do. And the tension releases, right? Let's say you're experiencing tension with other people in your relationship. Once you realize empathy, you go like, oh, that's why you did what you did. Or, oh, that's why you're angry. And the tension releases, right? The challenge is that it's not always easy to realize empathy, right? And I have a bunch of different theories on why this is, because I think but I'll not bore with you those details. But I think one of the things that I think is interesting to note is it's especially difficult to release tension if you've been trained as a problem solver.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're a doctor, if you're an engineer, if you're a business person, right? So, for example, like your engineering is probably too easy of an example. So I'll use an example of a doctor, right? A surgeon. A surgeon goes through like several years of training in surgery. They're trained to look at things, right? There's organs that you cut and like you do things to it. Like if you don't think of human beings as things,
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard to do surgery.
Yeah.
So you have to like think of it that way.
Yeah.
But if you've ever had to go through surgery and you had to talk to a surgeon, you want to kill them. Because they're like, oh, you have cancer. We'll just like cut this out of your body and we'll cut this and you'll be fine. And you're like, you're going to do what? And there's like this famous movie called The Doctor where like a surgeon like does this exact thing to his patient and then he has to go through surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And
then you realize.
And he realized, like, oh my God, this is horrible. Like,
yeah.
you should not treat me. And then he has to completely change his ways of doing surgery, like, because he now empathizes
Mm-hmm.
with what it's like to be a patient, right? So in some ways, the reason why this is for tension to release, you have to relax. But when you problem solve, you actually tense it up further, right? It's kind of like the Chinese finger trap. Like, do you know the Chinese finger trap?
Tell me about it.
Yeah, so the Chinese finger trap is this thing where you put your finger in like a hose and your natural instinct is to pull it out because, oh, that's a problem. You're stuck. You can't get it out. So you try harder to pull it out. You try harder to pull it out. And the harder you pull, the more you get stuck.
Okay.
The only way to get out of this Chinese finger trap is you put the fingers in. That relaxes the hose,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can take the hose out.
Oh, that's a
But
great example for this, what you just said.
Exactly, but it's non-obvious because you're trying to solve the problem. Like you're stuck, you try to pull it out, just makes it worse and worse and worse.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So
I think that many people actually around. It's natural
Yes.
to do this,
It's
and
very, very natural.
when I'm in a problem and I'm not telling that I'm now in tension and I experience a pressure, I'm trying to fix it. So I'm not telling all my surrounding that I'm in tension currently. I'm just trying to continue doing what I'm already doing and just make it even and I damage it even more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So I'll tell you a story, right?
Oh.
So, sorry, were you going to ask something else?
No, it's just your picture went back.
Oh, okay. So, right when COVID-19 hit, a CEO came to me, and he'd been experiencing tension with his CTO, right? Who was his co-founder, right? And they both had technical backgrounds, so it's not like the CEO is a non-technical person. They're both technical, trained as a computer scientist. They're both very well versed. It's just that one's a CEO, one's a CTO, right? And they've been having tension for months, right? And they never really released it, right? So when the CEO approached me, he shared his plans on how to solve this problem. And he was gonna solve this problem by going out and finding investment. And I was like, oh, what does getting outside investment have to do with solving this problem? And he said, well, here's the thing. If I can get outside investment, I can buy my CTO out. I can buy his shares, and then I could kick him out. Then I don't have a problem anymore, right?
Very simple.
Very simple, right? So I just want you to know that this is very, very common. Like one of the easiest things to do is get rid of the person. Like if you're a boss, the easiest thing to do is just fire them, right? It's just the easiest, most quickest thing you can possibly do, right? So that was his solution to the problem. Like, okay, man, I guess that makes sense. Since your problem is the CTO, if you get outside investment, buy his share out, and then you can, kick him out. And he had all the plans. He's like, oh, I can rationalize why I need this investment because our company is profitable, but it's not growing. The only way to grow is to get outside investment. so he won't suspect anything. So like blah blah blah. He's like got it all figured out, a complete plan on how to execute, right? So then I got to start talking with this guy, and one of the questions I asked him was, what are and they were very just so one of the things that I kept was they were very good friends in the beginning, right? And that's the only way you really start up a company together, is like you're actually really good friends with each other. So I asked him, like, so what are all the things that you really admire and appreciate about the CTO? And he like went down a long list of a bunch of things that he really genuinely appreciated about this person, all the things he's done over the years, how much time and energy the co-founder put into doing very, very difficult engineering tasks while he couldn't do these things because he was out doing sales or whatever, right? So clearly, like, he appreciated this co-founder very much, despite the fact that they were experiencing tension. So I then asked, when was the last time you explicitly shared your appreciation for all these things? And I don't mean just saying thank you. I mean like going into depth of how difficult those things, because you're an engineer, you know how difficult those things are and how much meaning and value those things had to you.
Mm-hmm.
And he just like stared at me. He's like, never. And at that point, he realized everything.
Yeah.
He said he could see that the CTO had been feeling deeply, deeply unappreciated, because despite all the Herculean efforts he's been putting in, the CEO just kept demanding he do more and more and more and more without any appreciation for the things he had done in the past. And just to be clear, this is not because CEO was a bad guy. He was really, really working. He's like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work. Maybe we should change directions. He's constantly changing his mind based on customer feedback, based on his own fears, bunch of things, right? But again, like you said before, he's not talking about these fears.
Yeah.
He's just ignoring it. He's just saying, like, to fix this problem, we should just listen to the customer and do this other thing. He just kept increasing more and more and more and more without ever explicitly appreciating anything to the CTO.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example where he realized empathy in his own psychology, like, and he could now see something he couldn't see before, right? So then what he did was, after our coaching session, he went and took the weekend to write a really long letter chronicling all the things that he had told me over the past few years he's been experiencing with a CTO, all the things that he remembers from those incidents, how much difficulty that he knows those tasks were held, and what kind of meaning and value every single one of those things had. This was a 4-page letter.
Wow.
So on Monday, he went back to the office, and he was very shy, so he just put it on his desk and he went back to his office. And then later on in the afternoon, they had a conversation, and they were finally able to start to realize empathy in their relationship because their tension started to lower. And to put things into context, his company had to do a major pivot to try to survive COVID-19, right? Because the company relied exclusively on offline events, right? And yes, it was a technology conference, but it was a technology solution for offline things. Right? Yeah. So when offline things go away, like their revenue goes to zero, right? So they had to completely shift to all virtual, right? This was impossible without doing that, right? So had this relationship, the tension in the relationship not lessened, he would still be looking for investment. That's what he would be like, oh, I gotta keep finding, like, well, maybe that is a good solution. Nobody knows the future. Nobody can predict the future. Like, I don't know what would have happened. But he, now having gone through this, he believes he's in a much better position because his CTO is on board to pivot in whatever way he sees fit, because he knows where the CEO is coming from, and he can see that unless they support each other, they're not going to be able to make it through a lot.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those things where it's critical to realize the things that we ignore and kind of brush off as not so important. Because we can't really see how these little things connect to the bigger picture. It's usually only in hindsight that we can see this. But in this case, it clearly did.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to, like, before you make a comment, I also want to mention that these are just momentary things, right? Releasing tension is only part of the picture. We also need nutrients, we need hormones and rest, right? So
and
nutrients.
How does you translate that to our organization?
The nutrients are like the knowledge that we gain from experience and reflection, right?
Mm-hmm.
So knowing more about other people, right? Or yourself, or your relationship, learning about it, like doing more things together, or having more conversations, more intimate, honest, and vulnerable conversations, talking about your relationships and interactions, discussing ways to make it better, exchanging feedbacks. I mean, all these things are nutrients, right? You're gaining knowledge from experience, and they help you better understand each other, right? They help you make better guesses about each other's intentions. You give each other the benefit of doubt instead of just going into like getting really angry and thinking the other person's out to get you or whatever. So I think those kinds of nutrients of knowledge from experience and reflection are useful. And hormones are basically emotional bonds, right? Whether it's, you know, making a promise and then keeping it earns you trust, right? Exchanging appreciation, right? Showing respect, apologizing, admitting mistakes. All these things are basically creating these hormonal, emotional bonds between people that also help you recover from these damages because you trust them, right? You appreciate them, and you remember these things that actually keep the relationship together. And rest is kind of self-explanatory in some ways, but it's basically anything that you can do with your mind or your relationship that is not going to tense it up. Playing, exercising. I mean, the irony is maybe when you exercise, your physical muscles might get tensed up, but your psychological and relational muscles actually loosen up. Right?
Yes.
So there's many things you can do, like walking, exercising, sleeping. I think, yes, tensing and releasing through realizing empathy is important, but also nutrients, hormones, and rest are equally important to sustain this in the longer term.
Wow, it was very enriching. Thanks, Lim. I think that there are many such examples during the coronavirus, but not only. For example, for managers that I don't think that they are even understand the impact of the current situation they are holding when they are missing trust or they are doing some, when everyone are working from home. And then instead of say, I'm in tension, I'm not sure if the work is being done currently, instead of doing that, they are diving into every detail and putting a lot of online Zoom meetings, and then the workers feel even less motivated. So it's a vicious cycle this way. Instead of saying, hey, I have attention now that we are all from home, let's figure out how can we make this work together in some and realizing empathy, like you just said. So how do you work this out with the managers currently, or how do you bring them to this notion?
Well, so here is where it's really interesting, right? So, and I think this is the crux of the issue in some ways in all of society, right? So, in order for somebody to realize empathy, they need support.
Lim, I just lost your picture. It's black again.
Oh, it's black. Can you see me now? All right.
Yeah.
So the crux of the issue is the catch-22 is, in order for us to realize empathy, somebody has to realize empathy with us.
Yeah.
And I think this is the chicken or the egg issue.
Yeah.
Right. So in my case, I think the only reason why the CEOs that I work with are able to do this is because they have me. Right? So they're meeting with me regularly so that I can help them release their own psychological tension. But then they have, so they have room in their being to realize empathy with other people, right? Otherwise, they're like in their own little tension and they can't do the things that they naturally can do when their tension's released, right? So I think in some ways we need to, as a society and as an organization, we need to figure out how do we redesign and restructure our organization so that everybody and somehow at some point are able to get this kind of support, including the CEO.
Right.
Everybody is a human being. Every single person has tension. Every single person cannot release it on their own. The only way for us to do this is by supporting each other. And I think this is the crux of the issue. And it's very difficult to unravel unless somebody takes the first step.
Yeah.
And admits and says, I'm in tension. I need help.
Yeah, and it needs a lot of courage to do that. And this is the place of leaders to step up.
Yeah. If anything, I would say if leadership is going first, if anything that they have to go first, in my mind, it's this.
Yeah.
Because it's very, very unlikely. I mean, like, ideally we say like, oh, bottom up and like all these wonderful, like, kind of idealistic things. But when rubber meets the road and when reality and practicality hits the core of human issues, leaders have to step up and do this first. There just really is no other way. And I to this day really appreciate and admire these CEOs who are approaching me, because it takes a lot of courage to do so, to admit that they need help. And another thing is, it feels selfish. That's another sort of aspect that is always preventing people from getting help, is like, oh, I shouldn't need help. I'm here to serve other people, which sounds wonderful. Like, I'm a servant leader. Like, yeah, that's great. but as the old saying goes, you got to put your own oxygen mask first before you can serve other people. There is no shame in putting your own oxygen mask first. It's not selfish. If anything, it ends up being more altruistic, because the only way we can survive together is by doing that.
Thank you so much, Slim. It was inspiring, really.